Russia shelled a UN mission near Kherson that was delivering humanitarian aid. Russian bloggers are demanding that Putin end the war. The first batch of Tomahawks is on its way to Ukraine. Key targets in Moscow have been designated. China has entered the war on Russia's side. The Ukrainian armed forces have broken through the front in the Pokrovsk and Zaporizhzhia directions. Crimea has never experienced a missile strike like this before. Shocking footage. Everything there is on fire. There is panic in the Kremlin. Britain has urgently delivered a huge batch of powerful missiles to Ukraine. NATO is threatening to wipe Kaliningrad off the map if Russia attacks. Hello, my name is Yulia Kokan, and right now here are the top stories. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you. Across the vastness of YouTube, Russia attacked a UN humanitarian mission in the Kherson region. On the morning of October 14th, Russian forces shelled the humanitarian mission of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in the Bilozerka community of Kherson Oblast. This was reported on Telegram by the head of the Kherson Regional Military Administration, Oleksandr Prokudin. According to him, the occupiers deliberately targeted 4 white UN-marked trucks with drones and artillery as they were delivering aid to civilians. As a result of the attack, 1 vehicle was burned and another was seriously damaged. 2 of the vehicles managed to escape the shelling. The people in the convoy were not harmed.
Today, the world's second-largest army defeated several tons of humanitarian aid. Terrorists? There's nothing more to say here.
I stand by it. Russia is a terrorist state, and it will definitely be held accountable for every one of its actions. Like if you agree. The United States may only be able to provide Ukraine with between 20 and 50 Tomahawk missiles, which are unlikely to change the course of the war. This was stated by Stacey Pettyjohn, director of the defense program at the Center for a New American Security, according to the Financial Times.
Washington may allocate between 20 and 50 Tomahawk missiles, which will not change the dynamics of the war. Although long-range missiles can supplement Ukraine's long-range drones and cruise missiles, their capabilities will still be very limited. Certainly, they are insufficient to enable sustained deep strikes against the Russian Federation.
A Ukrainian official told the publication that US President Donald Trump is closer than ever to supplying missiles. But the White House has made it clear that it is still. Mark Kansian, a former Pentagon official who now works at the Center for Strategic and International Studies think tank, estimated during recent military exercises that the US has a total of 4,150 missiles. Tomahawk. Since 2022, the Pentagon has purchased only about 200 missiles and has already fired more than 120 during exercises. According to defense experts, the Pentagon has requested funding for only 57 additional missiles. Tomahawk missiles in its 2026 budget. So, place your bets. How many Tomahawks will the US actually send to Ukraine? Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of you are watching us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the United States. We Ukrainians are very grateful to you for your support and proud to have such reasonable viewers. Let us know in the comments below where you're watching from and whether people in your country support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. And now let's continue. Things are about to get even more interesting. Meanwhile, the fight for our independence continues on the front lines. And this fight is difficult. The Russians continue to put pressure in the Donbass. According to deep state analysts, the gray zone near Serebryanka in the Donbass has already expanded. This particular area is one of the largest gray zones on the front line, where the Russians are exerting pressure. They keep launching assaults and the Ukrainian armed forces keep pushing them back. Moreover, they are delivering painful strikes to the enemy's rear. And these shots are truly impressive. So the 33rd Separate Assault Regiment, together with the 24th Separate Battalion, IDAR, are breaking through the enemy's defenses in southern Ukraine. During an operation in the Orikhiv direction in Zaporizhzhia region, Ukrainian assault troops liberated settlements. Mali, Shcherbaki, and partially Stepov. Additionally, the units were able to replenish the exchange fund by capturing Russian prisoners of war. Despite the enemy's unsuccessful attempts to advance in certain directions, our soldiers, over the past day, search and destruction of the enemy was carried out over an area of 3 to 4 square kilometers in the Pokrovsk district of Donetsk region. This was reported by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr
Thank you to all Ukrainian defenders who are destroying the enemy. I especially want to acknowledge the defenders from the 33rd Separate Assault Regiment and the 253rd Battalion.
Overall, according to Syrskyi, during the Dobropilya operation as of October 13th, 2025, 182.4 square kilometers have been liberated. 224.7 square kilometers have been cleared of enemy sabotage and reconnaissance groups. The occupiers have encountered major problems with air defense in the Zaporizhzhia direction. Partisans from the Atesh movement have revealed the details.
Our sources within the air defense units of the occupying forces in the Zaporizhzhia direction report a catastrophic state of equipment. Sanctions, missile strikes, actions by Ukraine's defense forces against repair facilities and manufacturing defects. These have led to the mass failure of anti-aircraft systems, including the Tor-SAM systems. Due to the acute shortage of operational systems, the occupiers are forced to use tractors to tow the launchers into position. This practice makes the equipment extremely vulnerable and turns these expensive systems into easy targets. A particular problem is the shortage of spare parts. Defense industry enterprises, operating under increased strain, are producing low-quality components that fail after only a short period of use.
A trail of smoke as black as Putin's soul from the burning Feodosia oil depot stretched all the way to Kerch and beyond across the strait. The Ukrainian armed forces are doing an excellent job. And what will happen when Trump finally delivers the Tomahawks? But that's far from all the bad news for the enemy. Details of what's happening on the theater of military operations are in our military review.
A serious escalation and a true nightmare for the Kremlin. This is all about the Tomahawk missiles, which may soon arrive in Ukraine to carry out combat missions.
Even just 2 Tomahawks hitting oil refineries on the territory of the occupying country would be a serious challenge for the logistics of the occupation army, and consequently would cause economic upheaval directly within the Russian Federation itself.
If Ukraine receives Tomahawk missiles, it will strike exclusively at military targets in Russia, President Volodymyr Zelensky stated.
The Russian side is well aware of the tactical and technical characteristics of these cruise missiles. They are outside the range of the Russian air defense system. And while the initial statements from the Russian side regarding the possible transfer of Tomahawks were frankly political bluff, with boastful claims that there would be an appropriate response from the occupying country, and even hints at a possible nuclear scenario Now, the statements of the Russian dictator only indicate that the Russian Federation will supposedly strengthen its air defense systems. But there is one significant but. The Russian Federation does not have air defense systems.
Despite the destruction that Russia brings to Ukraine every day, for example, these are the images of the attack on Ukrainian Odessa on the night of October 13th, Ukrainians themselves are striking precisely at the strategic facilities of the occupiers in the temporarily occupied territories and on the territory of Russia itself.
I would like to draw attention to the substation Kafa. This is Feodosia, which is part of the energy bridge that connects the temporarily occupied Ukrainian Crimea with the mainland part of the Russian Federation. It should be noted that as a result of the drone strikes by Special Operations Forces, power transformers, a closed switchgear, the control room, as well as the room with protective automation were damaged. Voltage fluctuations have already begun.
These are shots of the fire at the Tavricheskaya TPP near Simferopol.
In addition to this, there were also drone strikes by Special Operations Forces on the Simferopol substation. A series of explosions thundered there. This substation, like the Feodosia substation, primarily supports the operations of the Russian occupation army.
The burning oil depot in Feodosia could be seen from several kilometers away. Local social media report that the smoke plume from the burning oil depot in Feodosia stretched all the way to Kerch and further across the strait.
It's all on fire right now. There are 6 or 7 spots burning.
I think it's even more. We can't even see the ones that are right next to each other anymore.
Around midnight, mobile internet was shut off in northern Crimea. Then the electricity in the villages went out too, and it only came back at 7:30 in the morning. It was a restless night in Rostov-on-Don and the Rostov region.
There it is, I see the flare. It went up into the...
Oh, wow, just look at those absolutely beautiful clouds. Up in the sky.
Ukrainian forces are conducting counter-offensive operations in the areas of Dobropilya in Donetsk region and near Orikhiv in the Zaporizhzhia direction, according to Commander-in-Chief Volodymyr Zelensky.
Ukraine's defense forces are demonstrating what is called an active defense posture. That is, whenever possible, they successfully counterattack, using the tactic of loitering drones. Ukraine's defense forces have inflicted colossal losses on the occupiers, both in manpower and equipment. The ratio of irrecoverable to medical wounded losses has actually reached 1-to-1, although globally the standard is 1-to-3. That is, for every irrecoverable loss, so-called KIA, there are 3 medical wounded casualties.
Ukraine's defense forces carried out successful counter-offensive actions in the Donetsk region, pushing back Russian troops near 4 settlements. At the same time, the occupiers, despite significant losses, continue to exert pressure and advance in these sectors of the front.
I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a vast horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine. And if you can't, if you don't have the means to do so financially, write them words of support in the comments. I know they're watching us. China has increased its exports to Russia of components for manufacturing fiber optic drones. In 2025, the Russian army nearly seized the initiative from the Ukrainian armed forces in the drone war after the operation to liberate the Kursk region by actively deploying fiber optic drones on the front lines. This is reported by the Washington Post. The publication writes that operators can control drones using an ultra-thin cable without worrying that the enemy will jam the signal and knock the drone off course. The Washington Post, citing Chinese customs data, reports that a record amount of fiber optic cable was exported to Russia in May and June, with lengths of 190,400 kilometers and 208,000 kilometers. And in August, this figure rose to 524,800 kilometers. 800 kilometers. Based on the high value of the delivered batches, Joseph Webster, a research fellow at the Atlantic Council who monitors export growth, concludes that this is military-grade equipment. According to the publication's calculations, the August shipments alone are enough for 26,240 drones.
The sharp increase in exports of fiber optic cables and lithium-ion batteries, along with other drone components, demonstrates how close cooperation between Russian and Chinese manufacturers is helping Moscow gain a key advantage in the conflict, analysts believe. This is critically important. It's extremely important, said Katerina Bondar, a staff member at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, about China's support in advancing Russia on the front lines. China plays a major role here because they are satisfied and willing to adapt their production lines.
The most interesting thing is that China also exports fiber optic cables to Ukraine. But the scale of exports to Russia is incomparable. In August, it amounted to only 115 kilometers. And what do you think about this kind of game? China's? Is it just business and nothing more? Or is it something else? So write your thoughts, don't hold back in the comments. 5 months ahead of the promised schedule, the UK has provided Ukraine with hundreds of missiles for air defense systems. What kind of missiles are these, and what else is Foggy Albion ready to provide Ukraine with in the near future to help fight Putin's army? We'll tell you more next.
The United Kingdom is strengthening Ukraine's skies. Hundreds of missiles for air defense systems were delivered 5 months ahead of schedule. This was reported on the British government's website during the visit to Kyiv by the Minister for Defense Readiness and Industry, Luke Pollard.
The development of industrial partnerships is important so that we can learn from their experience, build an industrial base together that is necessary to defend the United Kingdom, deter our adversaries, and support Ukraine.
We're talking about light multi-purpose missiles, LMM, which are produced as part of the British military support program for Ukraine. This is a high-precision missile measuring 1.3 meters in length, weighing only 13 kilograms, and with a range of up to 8 kilometers. It is equipped with a laser infrared guidance system, and its 3-kilometer fragmentation warhead with a proximity fuse makes it effective against both aerial and ground targets. The missiles can be launched from various platforms, ground-based launchers such as Manpads, SAM systems, Stormer, HVM or Rapid Ranger, as well as from helicopters and ships.
As illegal Russian aggression continues to intensify, European countries must unite and strengthen their support. Ongoing industrial cooperation, both with our government colleagues and with international allies, remains the only way to ensure a safe and prosperous future for the people of Ukraine.
British support is not limited to supplies. At the same time, a new major phase of industrial cooperation has been announced. A £1.6 billion package. This is approximately $2 billion for integrating LMM missiles into Ukraine's air defense and expanding joint production capabilities. According to Luke Putin Polar, the total volume of British military aid in 2025 will reach £4.5 billion or $5.6 billion. A record figure for London for all time. And now another key element of cooperation. The United Kingdom and Ukraine are launching joint production of interceptor drones. The project could start in the coming months. We're talking about a production line capable of turning out around 2,000 interceptors per month. Such a pace is exactly what's needed to counter massive Shahed swarms and other large-scale attacks by combat UAVs. The first production lines will be located in the United Kingdom, but the structure of the project is designed to be flexible, so it can quickly respond to the needs of the front and move capacity closer to Ukraine if necessary. The British side promises to contribute development, research expertise, and modern manufacturing technologies that Ukrainian factories currently lack. This is not just a supply contract, it's an attempt to create sovereign capabilities for Ukraine. Equipment, technical support, training, joint research and development, supply chains. In parallel with the UK, the Netherlands also discussed a memorandum on joint drone production. European partners are building industrial cooperation that is meant to function not as a one-time delivery, but as a series of production lines, services, and training.
So if we talk about the quality of drones, we have long since caught up with the so-called Russian, but in reality Iranian Chinese Shaheds. The question was whether we could scale up production in the same way it was done for Russia, Iran, and China. It turned out we could. So when it comes to Daegun drones, we are now close to parity not only in terms of the quality of the machines, but also in terms of their quantity, which is very important in this case. After all, this is not the kind of war that can be won with pinpoint strikes. Here, the sheer scale of the strikes is what matters. When we're talking about numbers like a 20% reduction in Russia's entire oil refining industry, that's when you need this kind of scale. So we've finally reached that scale.
Other allies of Ukraine are also preparing new support measures. The United States plans to continue supplying advanced weaponry, including air defense systems, artillery, and cruise missiles, as well as strengthening the defense of Ukraine's infrastructure. According to preliminary plans, in 2025 to 2026, the volume of military aid could amount to several billion dollars. Among the European countries, Germany and France are preparing to supply armored vehicles and ammunition, as well as expanding the training of Ukrainian military personnel at their training centers. Poland and the Baltic states are considering the possibility of providing additional types of weapons and equipment, as well as conducting joint exercises to enhance the combat readiness of Ukrainian troops. In addition, the allies are developing plans for the long-term integration of new air defense systems and artillery complexes, so that Ukraine can build a resilient defense network and prepare for possible escalation from Russia. As part of humanitarian support, there are plans to expand programs for the restoration of infrastructure. Medical assistance and the training of specialists to work in crisis conditions are also expected to be expanded.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Ukrainians are watching with fear as Europe loses interest in supporting Ukraine. This is reported by Politico. Despite being accustomed to living in a state of war, anxiety is growing among Ukrainians. Has Europe grown tired of providing support? The publication Politico notes that voices calling for peace are increasingly being heard in European capitals, at any cost. Signs of changing attitudes are especially noticeable in Poland. According to surveys conducted this summer, only 35% of Poles now support Ukraine's accession to the European Union, whereas in 2022, that number was 85%. More than half of those surveyed believe that the war should be ended, even at the cost of territorial concessions. Additionally, the level of support for Ukrainian refugees is also declining. even though they are the ones helping the Polish economy, filling the labor shortage and stimulating growth. Most Poles are convinced that the scale of assistance has already gone too far. Against this backdrop, Ukrainians are still grateful to Poland for its support, but they increasingly feel that the European dream of EU membership and lasting solidarity may be slipping out of their hands. The same picture can be seen in other European countries.
According to a study conducted at the beginning of the year, most Poles also believe that the scale of assistance to Ukrainian refugees has already gone too far, despite evidence that refugees have a positive impact on Poland's economy, filling labor shortages and stimulating growth. The same trend is being repeated in other European countries. In Germany, the majority still supports sending aid to Ukraine, but 52% believe that Kyiv should give up the occupied territories for the sake of peace. Across the continent, countries like Italy and France maintain official support, but their populations are increasingly skeptical about admitting Ukraine into the EU.
What do you think about Europe's position? Whose side are you on? Here's the news. Just listen to this. Blogger and journalist Denis Kazansky writes that Russian media have started whining, saying they should have agreed to Trump's peace proposal and that Putin made a mistake by deciding to continue the war. That's why they're now openly saying that the special military operation should be ended and that things will only get worse for Russia from here. Listen for yourself.
Trump really did want peace in Ukraine. Well, that's my position. I thought that was a more advantageous situation for us. That advantageous situation is over. This needs to be said directly. I don't know, maybe the Russian president has his own motives and reasons, the root causes of the conflict that we're talking about. But it seems to me that the situation ahead will be worse. Trump, if, let's say, we end up having the desire for our own internal reasons, economic, strategic. Well, what exactly is it that you are attempting to communicate or convey to me at this precise moment in time? And could you please provide further details or specific information regarding the subject matter you are referencing?
What can I say? An awakening in Russia will definitely come to everyone. It's only a matter of time. The Russian army has faced an unprecedented shortage of tanks. During the period of the Great War, the Kremlin lost 20,000 of these combat vehicles. More on the causes and consequences of the tank crisis faced by the occupiers coming up next.
Pilots from the 3rd Assault Unit used 2 drones to destroy a Russian tank that was hidden in a forest belt. One of the drones flies straight into the barrel. Over the past year, videos like this showing the destruction of a tank have become quite rare, since the Ukrainian armed forces have knocked out a huge amount of the occupiers' equipment. The Russian army is essentially forced to carry out assaults on foot or on motorcycles.
They're running out of combat vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, and tanks. So they have to put the infantry simply on motorcycles or on civilian unarmored vehicles.
Since the start of the full-scale invasion, the Ukrainian armed forces have destroyed more than 11,000 Russian tanks. These are figures from the General Staff of the Ukrainian Command. Only a third of the tanks that were in the reserves of the Russian armed forces before the invasion of Ukraine remain.
After 3 years of war, Moscow has depleted its tank reserves to such an extent that, according to reports, they are almost exhausted. Although the Kremlin insists there are no problems replenishing tanks. Notably, in 2022, Russia's tank reserves were stored at 24 bases across the country. Today, only 9 such facilities remain in operation. Peter Succio, military analyst.
Russia has significantly slowed the use of Soviet-era tanks on the front line, as the gray zone is filled with Ukrainian UAVs, for which tanks are easy prey. Data on the loss of a large portion of tanks in the war with Ukraine since December 2022 is also confirmed by the American Institute for the Study of War.
Russia still has 46% of its pre-war stock of tanks, 42% of its pre-war stock of infantry fighting vehicles, and 48% of its pre-war stock of armored personnel carriers. Satellite images of 8 Russian military depots apparently show that Russia has depleted most of its vehicle stockpile warehouses. And a source on social media estimated that Russia will likely exhaust its remaining stockpiles of tanks and armored vehicles by the end of 2025. Russia may have additional armored vehicles and tanks in covered storage that are not visible in satellite images.
The Russian Federation is now facing a dilemma. The stockpiles of Soviet-era armored vehicles are almost completely depleted. About 60% of the Soviet-era armored vehicles that were in long-term storage depots on the territory of the Russian Federation have effectively been destroyed by Ukrainian defense forces.
Over more than 3 years of war, the Kremlin has withdrawn most of its tanks from storage. These vehicles went from storage to depots and then to the front lines where they were destroyed, captured, or abandoned. The resources and efforts spent on restoring these vehicles did not pay off and failed to deliver the desired results on the battlefield. Now, there simply isn't the necessary amount of equipment left.
According to the latest intelligence data from open sources, as of today, Russia has only 2,887 tanks in storage, and more than half of them are in poor condition. Less than a quarter of them could be classified as fit for use on the battlefield. Fewer than 180 tanks were considered relatively modern, while the rest consisted of outdated T-62, T-64 and T-72 tanks, early model T-72s.
On the front line facing Ukraine's defense forces, this is just a drop in the ocean.
Given figures from various sources, the question now is not whether mothballed Russian tanks will appear on the battlefield, but when this might happen, and in general, whether it is possible to do so in the necessary quantities.
And what if there's a third world war? What actions would be taken? Former commander of the US Army in Europe, Ben Hodges, commented on the potential of a Russian attack on NATO. He says that if Russia attacked Poland this year, that is Russia itself, would be destroyed.
If Russia attacked Poland in 2025 in the same way it attacked Ukraine, it would also be destroyed by the air forces, NATO and the alliance's ground troops. Kaliningrad would be eliminated within the very first hours. In the first hours, Kaliningrad would be gone. All Russian facilities would be destroyed. Any Russian military facilities in Sevastopol as well.
Sevastopol too. According to him, if we go back to 2014, when the war began, Europe, the US and Canada generally supported Ukraine. But many countries were still too dependent on Russia for oil and gas supplies. But if the policy had been tougher toward the Kremlin, Ukraine would be in a better position. Well, it is what it is. And now it is absolutely necessary to make it unequivocally clear to Vladimir Putin that he could be left entirely toothless. To achieve this, the Western nations need to fully understand that they must actively fight against Russia. This is particularly pressing because even the drone attack on Poland has regrettably not yet led to the desired result.